Hey y'all, it's Dawn, and I'm so glad you're back. I've got another fun, budget-friendly DIY video for you today. I lightly sanded a piece of Dollar Tree wood and then applied a layer of antiquing wax using a baby wipe. I also applied the antiquing wax to one of the small Dollar Tree blocks. I added some green paint and water to a cup and mixed it well to create a green stain for the rest of the Dollar Tree blocks. I used a piece of painter's tape and placed the blocks on it. I was trying not to get the bandage on my finger too dirty. I simply painted the stain mixture onto the blocks and continued adding green paint until I liked the color on the blocks. Once everything was dry, I found the center of the board and marked it with a pencil. I glued down all the blocks with hot glue in the shape of a little Christmas tree. I added a couple of rusty stars to the top of the tree and then distressed the tree with white chalk paint. And just look at how stinking cute it turned out. I think it is so adorable. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I've had this cute little barn in my stash for quite a while. I recently picked up some cute snowflake scrap paper and decided I'd cover the barn with it. I turned the paper over and traced around the barn with a pencil. Next, I used my scissors to cut the barn shape out. I laid the paper on top of the barn and rubbed around the top edge to make an indentation so I could cut it down to fit the front. I tried to remove the wood from the top of the barn, but it just would not budge. I trimmed away the excess and of course I trimmed it a little too much in this area. Since the red really showed, I decided to just paint the barn gray. I didn't want to get any gray paint on the wood section, so I taped it off with some painter's tape and removed the original paper from the barn. I added the gray paint to the front and the sides of the barn. I added a layer of Mod Podge and then the scrapbook paper. I used a fingernail file and went around the edges to remove any more excess paper. and then added another layer of Mod Podge over the top. I also went back and painted all the red with the gray paint. I used my Cricut and cut out some white vinyl that says the most wonderful time of the year and applied it using transfer tape. I thought the white would pop against the darker colors in the scrapbook paper, but it didn't turn out like I saw it in my head. I may try this again and use a different color of vinyl, maybe gold. I'm not sure. Let me know what color of vinyl, or if you would have done something else to the front of the barn in the comments. I picked up this adorable little red farm truck from Hobby Lobby. Using my Cricut, I cut out some vinyl for the side door of the truck and applied it. I placed some hot glue in the back of the truck and attached a piece of styrofoam with 3 little Christmas trees in the back. And just look at how adorable. I think this is one of the quickest decor items ever. And it's so stinking adorable. Let me know what you think in the comments. I found some glass mason jars in my stash and wanted to make a Christmas centerpiece. I added some gloss Mod Podge to some white chalk paint and stirred it well. I painted the larger jar with the white mixture. I think I got this jar from Dollar General last year. I thought it was so cute with the candy cane on the front. Once the first layer was dry, I went ahead and painted the jar with 2 more coats of the white. I wrapped some twine around the top of the jar and created a little tassel. This was a little harder than usual because of my bandaged finger. For the 2 smaller jars, I mixed red chalk paint and Mod Podge together and painted both of them with 2 coats. To finish these 2 off, I wrapped twine around the top of the first one and tied a little bow. And the other one, I just wrapped some twine around the top. By this time, my finger was throbbing and I just couldn't tie another bow. I added florals from my stash to each of the jars. And now I have this adorable Christmas centerpiece. I think it turned out so stinking cute. But let me know what you think in the comments. For this DIY, I used some aluminum wire from Hobby Lobby. I pulled up from the middle and cut the wire. You don't have to do it from the middle. You can also pull it from the end. After placing the first bead onto the wire, I realized I needed to straighten the wire out. As you can see, I left a little curve at the end of the wire so the beads wouldn't fall off. I used some white beads I found in my stash. I'm pretty sure these came from my Amazon store, but I'm not 100% sure about that. I started out with 24 beads and placed them onto the aluminum wire. And then began twisting the wire into the shape of a Christmas tree. And realized I needed to add a few more beads so the bottom would sit flat. I added 10 more beads for a total of 34. I twisted and trimmed the end on the bottom of the tree. And then messed around with it until I was happy with the way it looked. I used a pair of jewelry pliers to lift the end on the top and used clear Gorilla Glue and a dab of hot glue to attach a small rusty star to the top of the tree. And I just love how this turned out. It is perfect for a Christmas tea or tray. I purchased a bag of white flowers from my Amazon store for this project. I had the cone in my stash from last Christmas. I trimmed the feathers down to about the same length and began hot gluing them around the cone. I used a Dollar Tree silicone finger protector while I held the feathers in place. When I got to the top, I glued 2 feathers across from each other and then added 2 more feathers on the sides of these. I hope that makes sense. I was trying to round off the feathers instead of making them look square. Once I had the cone mostly covered, I went back in with more feathers to fill in any gaps and holes. I trimmed the feathers around the bottom because the feather tree wasn't wanting to sit flat, and I think it was because of the longer feathers on the bottom. To finish the tree off, I placed a rusty metal star on top of it. And just look at how elegant and adorable it turned out. I may do another one with some gray feathers that I have on hand. I think they would look amazing sitting on a mantle or a table together. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. For this project, I used a couple of Dollar Tree square signs. They were already painted white, so I didn't have to paint them. I did glue scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby to the inside of both and added some nautical rope from Dollar Tree. The first thing was to stain the tree trunks with Waverly wax. I applied the stain with a Dollar Tree makeup sponge and then wiped it off with a paper towel. The pieces of wood I'm using are leftovers from previous projects, so there was very little cutting that I had to do for this. I used leftover tree pieces for the trees. The scrapbook paper I'm using I got from Tuesday Morning. I think I got it for about $5 for a 25-piece pack. I cut the scrapbook paper down so it would fit on the tree. I then used Mod Podge to glue the paper to the wood. I got this little brush out of the makeup section at Dollar Tree. The brushes work great for applying Mod Podge and also for painting. The bristles don't fall out like regular cheap paint brushes. I folded the edges over the wood and glued them down also. I went ahead and glued the small tree and the trunk to the box. I cut down the scrapbook paper for the larger tree and used Mod Podge the same way I did for the smaller tree. I wanted the second tree to stick out a little, so I used a tumbling tower block and hot glued it to the back of the tree. I also went ahead and glued the trunk to the tree. I made sure it was going to fit and then hot glued the second tree to the box. And just look at how adorable the first Christmas tree shadow box turned out. For the second box, I hot glued two pieces of wood together to make one tree. I wanted this tree to be made with twine, so I added a bead of glue at the bottom of the tree and then placed the twine in the bead of glue. I did this for the first few rows of the tree, and then I just started wrapping the twine until I got closer to the top, adding glue just when I needed it. Once I got to the top, I still didn't really like how it looked, so I just started wrapping the twine in different patterns up and down the tree. I attached a block and the trunk to the back of the tree. And just look at how stinking cute they turned out. Let me know in the comments what you think. I found these little square wood signs at Hobby Lobby. I love using these to make tier tray signs. The first thing I did was tape off the inside of the sign with painter's tape and stain the frame with Waverly antiquing wax. I then taped off the frame with painter's tape and painted the inside of the frame with Folk Art Imperial Red chalk paint. Once the paint was dry, I removed the tape. I found this cut file on Design Bundles, sized it down in Design Space, and applied it to the center of the frame. You'll find a link to design bundles in the description. They have some great cut files at really inexpensive prices, so be sure to check them out. And just look at how stinking cute this little tiare tray wood sign is. Let me know what you think in the comments. I love making wood signs. It doesn't matter the size or shape. There's just something about working with wood that is enjoyable and comforting to me. I used E6000 to glue 3 boards together. To apply the glue, I used a skewer and put the glue on it, and then rubbed the glue onto the side of the wood. After applying the E6000, I used hot glue and glued craft sticks on the back to hold the boards in place until the E6000 was dry. After applying the first craft stick, I realized they were a little too long. So I suggest cutting the craft stick down prior to gluing them onto the wood sign. I had to use a utility knife on this first stick, and it was sort of a pain. I glued the sticks going from side to side, and then glued more sticks going up and down on the seam of the wood. The wood was a little rough. I tried to sand it, but it just wasn't working. So I used some sheetrock mud and applied it to the front of the sign using a Dollar Tree scraper. I applied the mud to the wood and then scraped off the excess, trying to make it as even and smooth as possible. Once it was dry, I took the sign outside and used my orbital sander to get a smooth surface. I used white chalk paint and painted the front of the sign. And yeah, I may have poured a little bit too much, but my big paintbrush was nowhere to be found, so I was having to use this small one. I sat the sign to the side to dry. I had cut down another piece of wood to be the top and bottom frame. I used antiquing wax to stain both of these. I had cut the wood so it would hang over the side 1/4 of an inch on both sides of the sign. And I wanted only half the frame on the sign itself. So I measured and made my marks on the back of the wood. Once the sign was dry, I hot glued the frame pieces to the top and the bottom of the sign, using my lines to make sure they were even and straight. I used my Cricut to cut out this cute tree on some Plaid vinyl. I got the tree in a holiday bundle from Design Bundles. I used a ruler to find the center of the tree and then used tape to tape it into place. so I could center up the words under the tree and add everything to my transfer paper. This way I knew everything was straight and centered and fit onto the sign. After applying the transfer paper, I peeled the back off the vinyl and applied the vinyl to my sign. And when I started removing the transfer paper, that is when I realized the sheetrock mud wasn't completely dry. My letters just wouldn't stick, and it kept pulling up the mud. The tree portion came off fine and stuck perfect. So I just removed the letters from the sign and let it dry overnight. I did go ahead and add nautical rope to the back for a hanger. I used my ruler and measured over 1/2 inch on both sides. Hot glued the rope and then added another layer of hot glue on top of the rope to make sure it held. The next morning I cut out the words for the sign and transferred them to my transfer paper. I then had to eyeball the center and applied the words to the sign. I then used gloss Mod Podge to seal the entire sign. I think this project turned out pretty amazing. Let me know what you think in the comments. I got this mini wreath form from Dollar Tree. I had gotten some of the ribbon in a craft haul from Facebook Marketplace, and some of it came from Dollar Tree and Dollar General. To start, I took the ribbon off the spool and decided to cut it down to 8 inches. I didn't like the wire in the ribbon, so I took it out and set it to the side. I save all the wire when I take it out of my ribbon. You never know when you might need it. I didn't like the way the fat ribbon looked when I tied it on the wreath form, so I cut it in half, and that worked for me. So I went ahead and removed the wire and cut in half all the natural burlap ribbon I had. I then measured, cut out, and removed the wire from all the other ribbon I was going to use for the wreath. So now that all the different ribbon was cut, I needed to attach it to the wire wreath form. I did this by folding the ribbon in half, putting the loop through the wire, and pulling the tail through the loop. I started on the outside ring first. I did this all around, alternating the ribbon as I went. Once the outside was complete, I did the same process on the inside of the wreath form. I skipped the middle wire completely. I thought it was cute, but it was missing something. I kept playing around with different things for the middle until I found this red truck at Dollar General for $2. It was perfect. I needed to raise the truck up a little, so I used three 25mm wood beads and glued them to the back of the truck. I placed a bead on each of the tires and then one towards the top of the tree. I had to figure out how to attach it to the wreath so that it looked amazing. I played around with placement. When I found the perfect position, I added hot glue to the beads and applied the red truck to the wreath. I wanted the wreath to hang from a piece of ribbon, so I used this natural burlap wired ribbon and cut it down to size. I used the middle wire of the wreath form and slid one side of the ribbon under it. I then folded the ends of the ribbon down and glued them together at the top of the wreath. I think my first wreath turned out pretty stinking cute. Let me know in the comments if you like it. I think I love it. It is so cute. Let me know in the comments what you think about my first wreath. Please take a second to like this video and leave me a comment. This really helps my channel to grow so others just like yourself can find me. If you just found me, I hope you will join our little family by hitting the subscribe button. If you are already part of the family, thank you so much for your love and support. Y'all are the absolute best. Check out my new Amazon store for craft supply and farmhouse home decor recommendations. All the products I use from Amazon in my videos can be found there. Until next time, happy crafting!